Good morning, I'm Izzy Carden, and today I'm going to be talking about genetic cloning. So first, meet Dolly. She was the first artificially created mammal in the world. She was born in Scotland from the scientists at the Rosalind Institute at the University of Edinburgh. She was the first, after 276 miscarriages, she was the first one to successfully be born. And she paved the way for more developments in genetic cloning throughout the world. So today in my speech, I'm going to be covering cloning in animals, cloning in humans, and the ethical implications that have arisen from this type of experimentation and the laws that have been put in place to address them. But first, let's talk about the 3 different types of cloning. The first is gene cloning, where you take a segment of DNA and you clone it multiple times. So this is often used in police cases. When they have a small piece of evidence, they use it to reproduce more genetic material so they can identify it with a perpetrator. And the next is therapeutic, and that is where you create a clone of not an entire organism, but you stop it just before it is implanted into the surrogate mother. So you're left with just these mostly stem cells, but embryonic cells that can be used and differentiated into different types of cells for the body. And then there's full reproductive cloning, where you get an entire organism, and that's usually what we think of when we think about cloning. So this is the process of cloning. This comes up a lot later. So you can see that there are skin cells that are infused into an unfertilized egg from another adult female. And those are fused together, and then you get the embryos, which are used in therapeutic cloning. However, if you plant it into a surrogate mother, you will end up with a clone. However, the surrogate mother has to be genetically able to withhold supporting the embryo of this clone, so it has to be a similar species. So, what types of animals have been cloned? Here's a list from the National Genome Research Institute, and you can see that there are many different types of animals on here, including sheep, horses, dogs, cats, and so forth. These are generally used for research purposes, and from cloning these animals, scientists have figured out that some animals are easier to clone than others. So mice are a lot easier to clone than rats, even though they're so similar. Some are just more difficult than others, and humans are the hardest to clone. So why do we clone animals? A lot of the times it's for livestock purposes, so that farms can create more of their prized, ox or livestock or whatever they're using. A lot of the times it's used for competition horses. So if you have a state fair and you want the biggest pig, you will clone them so you can have multiple winners. In addition to that, a lot of competitive sports teams that use animals, such as polo teams, all of those are clones. As Business Insider said, all of those teams are just completely clones of the best horses they've ever had. However, it's not all perfect. There are a lot of downsides to reproductive cloning in animals that arise from, or a lot of problems that arise from this. One, they can be difficult and expensive, as you remember. Dolly was after 276 miscarriages that they put into these sheep that they all had to deal with until they finally produced Dolly. In addition to that, it's also difficult to produce a clone that doesn't have a species that's similar to it. So you can't just all of a sudden clone an extinct species, because there has to be a current living species that's close enough to it to be able to support it. Now, a lot of these problems can be solved with advancements in technology. So improvements in cloning animals can help with the efficiency of it and the cost. However, it's still very difficult, and it's not generally deeply researched because of a lot of these problems. However, even though if you have 2 genetically cloned individuals, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to look exactly the same, as was the case for Rainbow. So on this first cat right here is the original cat that was trying to be cloned, and that is the offspring, Rainbow, on the right there, and that's Rainbow with her surrogate mother. So this happened because even though they're genetically related, cats develop their physical attributes when they're in the womb. So you can see that the coloring and the pattern is the same as the surrogate mother and not as the cloned original mother. However, their structure is still the same. So they still have the white underbelly, but the top part that has color on it. So just to be clear, no humans have ever officially been cloned. However, a lot of people have claimed to have cloned them. So you have two very infamous cases. And these aren't the only two that have claimed to reproduce or clone humans, but these are the two most famous. So there was a doctor in South Korea that claimed for many years that he had created this clone. However, he never produced any scientific research to prove that this had happened. But then it was later proved as fraudulent. However, the case of Eve, she was very famous when she first came out. She was said to be produced from the company Clonaid, which is this scientific research company that was based out of this religious cult that believed that humans were clones of aliens, and they claimed in 2002 that they had made the first human clone in the world. However, and her name was Eve. However, no actual evidence of her existence has ever been proven, even though that happened 17 years ago. No evidence has ever been proven, and generally it's not accepted that she exists, obviously. So, however, it raises a lot of complications with cloning because you don't generally get an entire person. A lot of the time, or generally, you have just where the research stops at the embryonic stage. And these are the possibilities that scientists have speculated that can be possible with cloning in humans. So you have things as tissue replacement, safer surgeries, and anything that can really, anything with a cell degeneration, such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, anything like that, they're saying that they can improve upon that and help relieve a lot of the side effects of those diseases from these embryonic cells. They're going to be able, because they haven't differentiated yet, and so they're able to create them into the type of cells that they need to help combat a lot of these. And one of the most important things is safer surgeries because you have more or less foreign objects that are introduced into the body, which can make for safer surgeries and can help reduce the possibility of infection due to these surgeries. However, these also have a lot of biological threats, and a lot of them that you don't generally think of off the bat because you have the possibilities that you're thinking of, but you're not thinking of producing an entire human clone. So a lot of the times that takes away the individuality that we all see in ourselves, because if there's two of us, what makes one of us different? And also you're facing the fact that you are artificially creating another clone of a human being that's not natural in the world. And so a lot of research has been stopped by these problems because a lot of scientists don't want to pass that point and not be able to come back once they introduce this kind of technology. So that moves into the ethical concerns. Humans aren't the only ones that have a lot of ethical concerns that they have to consider when cloning. There's also a lot of problems with cloning in animals because they don't know, especially for the livestock animals, you don't know what kind of, materials you're going to be ingesting. If it's a cloned animal, you don't know, the possibilities of that. And these haven't been widely used, and there aren't a lot of studies knowing the effects of consuming cloned animals in humans. So that's the biggest issue that they face. Generally, if you're just cloning them for competitive purposes, there's not a lot there, except that it is expensive and that it is very taxing on the animals. Generally, that kind of keeps them focused on researching for animals instead of humans. A lot of laws have been introduced in the world to address these issues, and 46 countries in the world have created laws surrounding cloning. However, the US does not have any explicit laws, and a lot of these laws in other countries explicitly state that you cannot reproductively clone a human. So you cannot have an entire human that has been cloned. You can have embryonic cells, but that also has a lot of fine restrictions on it, but the US doesn't have any. The only kind of restrictions that the US has is that the US does not fund research projects in cloning. However, if you have an independent company that does want to do cloning research experiments, then they are able to do that in the US. So in conclusion, there are both pros and cons to animals and humans being cloned. However, these ethical implications have stopped a lot of research in this area because scientists do not want to go past the point of no return, and they don't want to clone something just because they can, just because that'll be an advancement and for no actual purpose.